So when I start to write, I usually know where I'm going, but I don't have a real plan. I know where I'm going, and I normally know the ending. And in fact, the book I've just started on, I've actually written the ending, even though I'm only up to the first 4 chapters. And that happened with another book as well. My 6th book, I actually wrote the complete last chapter when I was only halfway through the book, because the ideas do jump around a bit. But when I sit down and the paper's there and I get started, and when the words come, it's just amazing. It is one of the most wonderful feelings that you can possibly have if you love to write. And so why I would like to make a living out of writing, I would write whether I was being paid or not, because it just gives me so much pleasure. So when I sit down to write the first 3, it's really interesting. I've just started a new book, as I said, and the characters kind of take over. You hear writers say that and you say, what do they mean? I'll give you an example. In this latest book, the main character's name is Charlotte Tremaine. And I decided at the beginning she had to be Charlotte. It was going to be quite formal. She was going to be quite a formal kind of girl, and then speak well and all those sorts of things. By the time I got to halfway through the chapter, she was Charlie. And she's been Charlie ever since. It just, somehow the characters push and they change. Sometimes I start with someone who's going to be the main character and somebody else becomes more important. In my Antwerp series, I started with Snowball the cat, who was just going to sort of wander through the first book. It was really a most unimportant character. He was a most unimportant character. Actually, Charlotte is she. She's an unimportant character. But she's become really important now. She's in the 4 books of the series, and in the 2nd book, she's very prominent. So I think that pleasure of not quite knowing where you're going to go really makes writing fun. When I get to the end, usually it's a certain amount of relief, yes. But the hard part's the middle. You know, the first 5 or 6 chapters, okay. The last 3 or 4, because you sort of know where you're going, but that bit in the middle, to keep the interest, to keep the conflict going, that's the hard part, and that's the part where you've got to really be very disciplined and motivated. The most important thing I do is to take time out. So, for example, there's 2 places that are great for getting inspiration. One is in the shower, which is interesting because I've got lots of very wet notebooks beside the shower. Right, jump out, write a word, and jump back in again. But this really, and I have very long showers sometimes, because you suddenly find your brain has gone away and you're writing a book. The other place is walking. Walking is a really, if I'm stuck and I go for a walk, particularly along the Brisbane River, it's gorgeous down there, and I go for a walk, and then and things start happening in my head. I sometimes go to the movies. I have coffee with writer friends and we talk to each other, and so quite often those things. But I find the most important thing is to turn off my iPad, turn off my emails, turn off the computer and get right away. Once a year, when I've finished my book, I go away for about 10 days with no telephone, no emails, and I just go back over the book and do my editing, and I find that's wonderful. I actually come back so refreshed, I'm ready for the next book straight away. So that works really well. When I became principal of a school, I had some power. And in that role, I said I think every student should learn some Shakespeare. So we started introducing Shakespeare from grade 8. So from grade 8 to grade 12, students read Shakespeare. Not having to read every word and things like that, but just dipping in and getting the idea and learning about the plot and so on. I had one student, captain of my rugby team, so not necessarily madly interested in literature. He just simply fell in love with Shakespeare. He fell in love with Shakespeare to the extent that he still emails me sort of 20 years after he left school and quotes Shakespeare to me. But more than that, he set up a tradition in grade 12 that the induction for our school captains was the love scene from Romeo and Juliet. And so every year our school male and female captains did the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet in front of the whole school as their induction as school leaders. So I thought that was a little bit unusual. And it stayed long after I'd gone. They were still doing it because this young man was so enthralled by Shakespeare that I think it almost changed his life and the way that he did things. So I think that made a big difference. I've certainly had other students as well who have begun writing themselves and written some very good things, and some of them who probably will become writers as a result of having dipped into some really good writers. Children are inspired no matter what age, really, by many of the same things. To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, stays timeless. And I've never come across a class where children haven't been inspired by that book. Some poets students love, and some interesting ones you would think, well, maybe, you know, that they're so old-fashioned, why would they love them? But the sound of Keats, for example, almost every child gets that sound and the way the words go together. So there are some very, the main thing is just getting students, giving them access to it. My primary school, I also had a little thing in the primary school that the grade 7 students had to learn a poem off by heart. And so most of the students went for Banjo Patterson, and there were people all over the school reciting Man from Snowy River and Clancy of the Overflow. But they loved those as well because the rhyme and the rhythm, excuse me, and the words sitting together so nicely. They made lovely drama productions and things like that using the words. So students love words if you give them access to them. And I think that that's a really big thing that teachers can do. If children love words, they're going to love them all their lives. My father was like, he loved words, and he used to, I still hear the words that he said and the things he used to quote to us, and he used to run around the household quoting poetry and singing, and just the fact that he did that, I think, has stayed with me. When I wrote my first book, I dedicated, I think it's the first one in the series, to my parents, and I said to my mother who loves reading and my father who loved words, and that's how it was. And that's what I think we want to get into our children in schools. Whether they ever use them in their careers doesn't matter, because they've got them for the rest of their lives.